So what we are going to do is to talk about this important marketplace in today's context in India. And what we will do, we will just give you the basic glimpse of this marketplace and what it does, uh, and what is the purpose of this, and why do we think is that as an agricultural student, going forward, it might be worthwhile to learn these skills if you do not have already, because there are opportunities in the marketplace of a job taker and a job giver as a both. So taking this forward, so I will start with basics. Some certain things might already be known to you. Request you to humor me. Please do listen to what I'm trying to create a thread of what is this commodity derivatives marketplace. So this is the kind of an agenda. We will talk about the basic aspects, then a little bit about what exactly it does. And to do that, what are the basic research one needs to do to be aware of this particular marketplace. So to start with, we should start what is exactly is commodity. So any goods which are produced from the land, which you may have learned in your earlier courses, that the primary production is produced from the land is generally known as commodity. They are also the raw materials which are further processed to add value for our further consumption, and they can definitely be traded, or it can be used for trade and commerce and bought and sold either directly or within a market. Another very important characteristics to know that within a commodity, they are generally will have a uniform characteristic. So a wheat grown in Punjab may not be very different from wheat grown in MP, or sugar produced in UP or sugar produced in Tamil Nadu may not have a hugely different characteristics. They would be more or less same. Of course, there would be some differences based on certain aspects, but generally they would be the same. So that's why they are known as commodities. And in everyday life they are very commonly available, either in direct form or in indirect form for our consumptions. Bread, atta, coffee, milk, sugar, tea, anything which you consume as a food has a primary agricultural goods, which is a commodity which at the back of that initial supply chain. Of course, in addition to the agriculture, there are non-agricultural commodities as well. So if we talk about gold, crude oil, uh, metals, steel, iron ore, nickel, cadmium. So there are a lot of those non-agricultural commodities which are also there. But for today's topic, we are going to talk about, concentrate on the agricultural commodities. But these, as we had mentioned earlier, that these commodities once produced has to be transacted and taken to the consumption center. And to move from the production center to the consumption center, they move through various channels. And generally, a first channel of such commodities movement is a marketplace. So, what exactly is a marketplace? So a place where the goods change ownership. So there are buyer and sellers who actually transact between themselves or through somebody. To buyer pays the money and the supplier pays the goods, and it changes the ownership. But there are certain characteristics or features of a marketplace. A good marketplace, if I may define. A good marketplace should give you a fair price discovery. A lot of young people, you might be using e-commerce platform for your own consumption of maybe phone or clothes, or nowadays even food. Uh, so generally you tend to look at what are the prices for these aspects, these products at various marketplace, various e-commerce platforms. So generally, if there are large number of buyer and sellers, they tend to give you a fair price discovery. Why? Because there is a liquidity in that marketplace. Liquidity means that there are significant number of buyers and significant number of sellers, selling similar goods. So this actually avoids an oligopolistic or a monopolistic nature of a marketplace. So that means a good market should provide you with a fair price discovery through a liquidity pool. That means a large number of buyer and sellers. The transactions should be transparent in nature. How you transact, how you bid, how you discover the price. These markets should be able to give you a transparent nature the way they are governed. They should be even trustworthy. Trustworthy, that means they ensure that seller gets their payment in the right time, in the right format, at the right conditions. The goods, the buyers which they get should be of the quality which has been already determined. And if there is any dispute, by chance, if there is any dispute which occurs during this transaction, there is a reasonable dispute resolution which takes place, which is unbiased and very, very timely in nature. So these are the basic characteristics of a marketplace to ensure that properly the goods are transferred from one owner to the another. So, continuing with the types of market, agriculture being the physical goods, we need to have a physical market. That's very, very important. So, we all know there are APMCs in India, agriculture produce market committees, which are state legislated mandi yards, where the primary produce is sold by the farmers to the traders. And of course there are hearts, and then we have the wholesale markets, and then of course the retail market where me and you go and buy our daily needs. Along with that, in the past 10-15 years, there is a virtual market which has developed under this agricultural ecosystem. In this virtual market, the price discovery and the trade is virtual in nature. So that means the buyer and seller need not be present. And that is where they actually transact through a electronic platform to discover the price and even agree to buy and sell. But definitely there would be requirement of a settlement procedure, because as I said, the agricultural produce are physical in nature. Most of the time they need to be physically settled. So in this virtual market, the settlement are of two types: the physical side and the virtual side. That means there are cash settled. We will explain a little bit that how it will take place. So in physical market, everything is negotiable. The quantity, the quality, the farmers can bring in any quality or any quantity. He can bring in any day. He can go to any of these 7,000 odd market yards, and which can act as a delivery place, or they can agree to deliver at the buyer's area, buyer's location, and of course the prices. But in case of this virtual or the futures market, everything is standardized other than one aspect. So the quantity, the quality, the delivery date, the delivery place is standardized in nature, and only what is negotiated is the price. The settlement definitely can be physical, as I said, that one can take a delivery and give a delivery, and one can also settle through cash. That means I can exit the market and settle through cash. So that is, there are two forms of settlement which occurs in this marketplace. So, but why do we need futures market? So before we go the need of a futures market and its economic importance in the current, not only in the current system, but overall in the agricultural economy supply chain, we need to understand that over a period of time, India has moved from a deficit production system to a surplus production system. And I'm sure you are all aware that every year we have been breaking records in terms of the kind of cereal grains or other crops which we produce. And there has been a significant improvement in terms of per capita availability of these agricultural commodities in the marketplace in the country. But of course, there is a need of moving towards nutritional security. That is definitely a different topic altogether to be discussed. So just to illustrate this point, if you look at this 15-year period data point, that significant increment in terms of our production of various major agricultural crops has going up. So and still going up unless and until there is going to be a huge bottleneck because of certain other factors. We are in a we are in a hugely surplus agricultural production ecosystem. On a normal economic theory, the prices are supposed to be following the equilibrium, right? I mean, you have a higher supply, constant demand being non-elastic in nature, the prices are supposed to go down. But what we have seen and what we see on an everyday basis, the prices are never constant. So this is just an illustrative point through soybean spot prices, which we track from December 17 to March 19, and you can track it any period of time. You will see that the prices on an everyday basis changes, and so what it means that even if there is a higher production system which is happening in the country, the prices are never constant. The prices move up and down, and this is what we are going to talk about. So why it moves? Why it moves from suddenly up one side to the other side? There are various factors, and as we all know, most of the agricultural produce are produced only a period of 3 to 4 months, and consumed over a period of 12 months. We always have carryover stock. The crop acreage changes. Weather condition impacts the production system. The disease and pest infestations definitely impacts. The yield productivity changes. The imports policy changes, requirement changes. There are procurement from by the government agencies. So there are various of these factors which actually continue to influence the market uncertainties, and these market uncertainties leads to the price swings. What it means is that it is very important to understand these factors which actually impact your demand and supply, because these everybody has a different set of understanding of these factors based on their requirement and their business, and these uncertainties lead to a price perception, and these price perception are visible in the market when they transact, and that is what causes the price swings. So just an example from today's morning newspaper, if you look at it, if you look at the figure, this is Economic Times today morning ET, which actually has compared the last year's acreage to this year's acreage so far. And if you look at it, there has been a significant increase in the planting as of now, and especially interesting to note, for example, the cotton. And if it trend to be continued, so we can see that there would be definitely an impact when the cotton starts getting harvested from October November period onwards. There would be a significant impact. Similarly, we also see a very good indication of coarse cereals being higher, even if there is a good rainfall. So that might be leading to something else. So we need to really understand why these kind of system, or why this kind of production change which is happening. So one of the factors which we were talking about. uh, the other news aspect, if you look at the second link, so import duties. So suddenly there are planning of putting import duties on 300 foreign products. So as we are talking about that, if there are uh, import duties on some basic commodities or a raw material or even the finished products, then how it is going to impact your domestic demand and supply, because there are certain aspects of production system where you might be importing certain raw material to produce in the country, and so these dynamics keep on changing, so one needs to be aware of such dynamics, and these are the ones which impacts the market uncertainties, and these market uncertainties create these price swings, and these price swings are generally what we call the volatility in nature. Just to clarification, I mean, sometimes we have seen people call a unidirectional price movement as referred to a volatility, but be sure that is not a volatility. So that means if the demand supply mismatch is there and there is a unidirectional price movement, that we do not consider as volatility. The volatility is the uncertainty in the future supply and demand, which gets reflected in the price either up or down. So it could be a standard deviation. It is basically a standard deviation around the expected price. So this price volatility is one of the important factors which this futures market tend to minimize. I won't say control, tend to minimize. This is another illustrative example of the some of the major crops in the country. If you look at this annualized volatility of certain crops, castor, chana, guar seed, soybean, refined soy oil, and if you look at it, there is significant price movement upside or downside on a percentage basis, and this is what actually creates a challenge for the primary producer as well as the end user. Uh, if you have understood the price risk, what is important to understand is that why do we and how do we manage? So there are various ways and means. So these certain left side, if you look at, there are producers who actually can manage that. There could be a crop diversification. If you have 4 acres of land, you not necessarily plant everything on one crop because you do not know what is the price going to be. You can also reduce your input cost by pulling what is happening today from farmer producer companies. One can try to get into the contract farming model, which we must have studied, like Pepsi or McCain or Jan irrigation for mango. So there are various contract farming models which are available, and definitely there are when these tools are not available or in combination, risk management, price risk can be managed using the commodity derivatives market. Similarly, for processors, for example, there are many organizations who actually like gherkins, the small cucumbers in Karnataka, one of the first successful contract farming models. There are forward contracts where one can negotiate a year-long or a seasonal contract. A lot of crops which are exported, let's say grapes, are forward contracted with the grape growers in Nasik area. And there are, of course, user substitute. For example, if you're making animal feed and your major contribution to the animal feed, 60 to 70% is maize, and suddenly the maize price has gone up, you might be wanting to put bajra or other product to offset your, because you cannot change the last mile price, that is your consumer price, significantly. So you might want to substitute something else in your product mix to keep your cost same. Similarly, the processors also can use, along with the other, the top three, the price risk using the derivatives market. They can also manage their price risk. So basically, this is an additional tool which should be used for your price risk management along with various others. So that means, how do you do that? You need to have a marketplace which actually allows you to do that. And we have all known that goods are produced, they are transacted to changes hand from one point to the another, and then ultimately processed and used for final consumption. And in between, uh, everybody cannot hold the goods. There are certain people who can actually hold the goods in between, because as we have seen earlier, agriculture commodities are produced only in 3 to 4 months period and need to be consumed over the next 12 months till the next harvest comes in. The people with the funds, people with the capabilities and capacities hold the stock. Sometimes the farmers stock up to a certain extent, the traders stock, the large agri commodity players stock, and what we have seen, government definitely is the largest stockist in terms of paddy and wheat. So there is this, to maintain this demand and supply, there are various these participants who are there. And if I am holding the stock, And as I do not know what is the prices going to be when I sell that produce, I need a place that how do I keep my prices or the forward prices or the futures prices locked in. And this is what the futures market is all about. And why it's important to lock in my futures price, because efficient prices management leads to an improved resource allocation. So if you know exactly what is your wheat price going to be in the coming months, then you exactly plan that how much bread or atta you can manufacture and sell it at what price, and pay attention to those aspects rather than worrying about your price of the wheat in coming months when you wanted to produce. One method could be that I buy all my 12 months wheat requirement and lock in the capital, or I use the derivatives market to manage that price risk. So we also need to understand the physical market before we go ahead with the futures market. And I'm sure you are all aware the agricultural commodity market is reasonably long in their chain. There are a lot of links in between. Uh, and it's reasonably complex in nature. So in a normal economic theory, larger the link, longer the link, there are more cost involved because everybody needs to survive on that particular chain. So uh, so it's a normally a larger link, and the question is that how efficiently these links manage the whole supply chain, and we will see some inefficiency going forward. But before that, let's talk about certain problems in this physical market. There is definitely lack of proper price discovery, price dissemination, and transparency. You may have heard not all the mandis follow a transparent auctioning method, even if it is laid down in the legislative. They are definitely fragmented. We have approximately, including the sub yards, almost 7,000 market yards, which is still low, which is approximately 75 kilometers square kilometer to one market, which is significantly higher in terms of the distance to be traveled by small and marginal farmers. Most of the markets do not have a proper certification system, proper standardized weighing and weighing balances. So there are a lot of challenge in those standardization. Uh, there is because these markets are not very liquid in terms of the traders, because you have a large number of sellers coming in, you have a small number of buyers, there is always a possibility of cartelization. And definitely because we have small farmers, the very little marketable surplus from our subsistence or small acreage, there is a distress sell. And of course, this direct taxation of mandi cess leads to arbitrage opportunities, which also leads to a price fluctuation in two markets. So there are examples which I think we will explain in detail once you want to understand this marketplace in more in a much better way. So what happens in terms of the derivatives market? Similar players are there who has to, so there would be a seller, there would be a member broker through which one approaches exchange. There would be clearing and settlement requirements. So that means you have a clearing corporation. There are certain members, there are warehouses, because you need to settle physically, and the electronic negotiable warehouse receipt system with the repository functions, and ultimately the buyers. So in exchange, what you do, you discover the price and trade virtually. So that means there is no need of physical presence for the buyer and seller to come together. But once that transaction takes place, you have to ensure that this transaction gets completed through settlement process, where the clearing corporation, which guarantees the trade, so that means there is no counterparty default, and ensures that either a cash settlement, or if there is a need of physical settlement, which happens through a network of warehouses spread across the country, through electronic negotiable warehouse receipt system, and we have buyer. So this consolidated. This particular chain has consolidated itself and transparent in nature, as well as very uh, cost effective in terms of the transactions which takes place. So what is fair price discovery? That is one of the most important part. I think let's spend a minute on this. It a futures market actually reflects, it gives you a market participant's perception based based on today's fundamentals, that what could be a future price going forward. So if you look at it in a physical market vis-a-vis a futures market, uh, as I was explaining, because of our nature of our agricultural ecosystem, we have many sellers, few buyers. It is only located because of its physical constraint and logistical constraint. It is very localized in nature. There is less competition. It is less transparent. The prices mostly reflect the local demand and supply. It does not reflect a nationalized demand and supply most of the time. And the buyer and sellers, as I said, can because they know each other, which sometimes is good, but sometimes it is also impact, because the terms of the trades can be negotiated very easily for one's favor if he has a monetary or financial power. And in case of futures market, what we see, that because it's a national platform, there are large number of buyers and sellers, and it's more transparent in nature. In that sense, it creates a benchmark pricing. This is very important because there are large number of buyers and sellers. It creates a benchmark pricing, and very negligible chance of colluding, because it is not known who is buying and who is selling through this platform. And another advantage is that because it's digital in nature, the price information which is originates from this marketplace is at a real-time basis. It gets disseminated not only in the domestically but also across the world. So just to recollect, I think we understood what is a commodity in its basic term, what kind of markets are there for the commodity trading, the physical and the virtual. And we also understood one of the most important point is that why do commodity prices fluctuate on a day-to-day basis? What could be the major factors? And uh, we also saw that unidirectional price movement is not price volatility. It is the uncertainty of the price on the expected, on the ups or down, up depending upon whether you are a buyer or seller, which actually creates this volatility, and which is this important marketplace for us to ensure that this volatility is reduced. And volatility actually creates a problem for resource allocation in a marketplace, in our economy. So two major objectives. We have also talked about the features earlier. So price discovery and risk management, these are the two important aspects. That's why it's repeated here. And features in a nutshell, if we talk about what we spoke about earlier, if you look at, it's a centralized marketplace and digital in nature. The trades are predefined contracts. So that means the terms of the trade is already well known to both the parties, the buyer and the sellers. We also talked about the liquidity aspects, because the higher liquidity tend to give you a better and a fair price discovery. It is also financial integrities exist because of the counterparty risk, which is taken care by the clearing corporation, which ensures settlement guarantee. And overall, this is regulated by a central regulator, which is Security and Exchange Board of India, which also regulates equity market in the country. So some terms in this marketplace which are very common. If you tend to venture into this marketplace, you will hear these terms quite a bit: long, short, offset, open interest, margin, hedging, speculation, cash and carry, arbitrage opportunity, convergence of prices, threat of delivery. So these are the very basic important terms which are commonly used in this marketplace. So ultimately, if we can define on a single sentence, the what is futures, it's a legally binding contract that is standardized for quality, quantity, delivery locations, and settlement. They are traded for a negotiated price on futures exchange, and that helps in discover the price and ultimately price risk management. So once we have discovered the price and once we have managed the price risk, what exactly it does, as we were talking about, that it's the primary function. The resource allocation happens through better resource allocation happens because of this commodity derivatives marketplace, and that's where believe in the absence of futures market, there is actually more speculation in the physical market, because you are producing something which you are not sure that what price is going to sell, or you are selling something you are not aware that what raw material price you are going to get when you plan to produce your atta or sugar. So without this marketplace, it's very difficult to know what the future price is going to be. And if you do not know, then you don't allocate your resources more efficiently. It is not only about in India. So if you see, this is the global, most of the major exchanges in the world. One of the largest is in USA. It's currently known as CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which has taken over CBOT. CBOT has become a separate division which only mostly trades agricultural commodities. Then, of course, we have China as few of the largest. Then we also have Malaysia, where the crude palm oil, or which is being traded and acts as a benchmark globally. They trade on one commodity only, and it acts as a global benchmark price. And it also impacts India because we import almost 15 million tons of edible oil, and almost 6 to 7 million tons of palmolene from Malaysia and Indonesia. So we talked about this marketplace. We understood the basics. So what is the primary objective? We talked about the price discovery and the how to reduce the price risk. So, but there are various ways which we also saw previously, that you can do various aspects, that you can plant different crops, you can go to forward contracts, you can have a contract farming model, you can try to reduce your uh, input cost to hedge your price risk. So you can also use futures market. So these are the various processes through which actually you ensure that price risk is managed. And we will talk about the futures marketplace. So basically, it's a tool, it's a derivatives contract. It's to manage the price risk. So why it is known as derivatives? It actually doesn't trade the actual commodity. It trades the contract of a raw material or a commodity. It's a derivatives contract. So that is why it is known as uh, commodity derivatives, because they are traded on a exchange. They are exchanged. The ownership gets exchanged. The buy sell happens through a online centralized marketplace. They are called as exchanges, and they are leverage instruments. So at the time of trade, in the time of agreement to buy or sell, you need not to have the commodity at stock. So when you are planning to plant, or when you are planning to put up your trying to plan your sell of atta, and planning that you will buy your wheat at a later date, you can still buy or sell much before you have the physical commodity at your ownership, or your under your ownership. One can also manage to, so futures contracts are also bilateral contracts, but generally within a bilateral contract, the buyer and sellers are known to each other. The contract design is done by both buyer and sellers in discussion with themselves. But in the case of futures contract, the contract is designed by the exchange. Both buyer and seller actually has to accept these contract as the terms of the trade. So, going a little bit more detail, contract which is obligating the buyer to purchase or and a seller to sell the commodity at a predetermined future date at a pre-agreed price, because it's the futures, the fixed standardized specification, and definitely traded on exchange as we talked about. So the contract will have the quality and the quantity parameters. They will have the trading and the delivery unit and the trade size, which is the tick size, that at what price the contracts can move. You cannot put any value. There has to be a proper logic. There is a delivery ecosystem, that where you can deliver, at what time you can deliver, how you can deliver. So those logics are there. The contracts generally are traded for 6 months. So they have, that means the origin date and an expiry date, to ensure that nobody can take the market for a play. There are price limits, that a price limit of 4% up and down is fixed, that any given day the prices cannot move beyond that. There is also position limit, so that means it restricts people to take large positions to play the market. And of course, there are final settlement price. And within the contract, as we all know, the agricultural commodities, though they uh, primarily same, but there could be some quality differentiation, maybe because of the moisture or the protein content or the oil content. So there is a provision for premium and discount based on those quality and where you want to deliver. So these all these things are predefined. What is important is that what in a general supply chain, what we call the terms of the trade, this terms of the trade is predefined. So of course there are many ways to enter into this marketplace. We are going to talk about only hedging currently for in this webinar. So there are short hedge and long hedge. Short hedge means sell, that you take a sell position on the futures platform. So generally, short hedge is done by people who have the physical or intend to have the physical and then sell it going forward. So hedger is long on physical. So that means you are long on physical and short on futures platform. The reverse is also true. So normally, a primary producer or the FPOs or a trader who has bought from the farmers or from the mandi or from somewhere else will go short, and he will sell it to a processor who need to process those commodities to produce something else. And a processor in that fashion will have a long position, because he's going to need the material at a future date. So if the primary aspect, which is principle here, concept here, is that if you are long on physical, that means you either have the goods or going to have the goods, the commodity, you are supposed to do a short hedge. If you are short on the physical, that means you are planning to buy, or buying the commodity, you are going to long on the physical. So it is always opposite positions. So from the your physical market position to your futures market position. So I'll explain a little bit. If you look at this a mustard producer, that at the month of December he's planting his crop. The current spot price is around 2902 per quintal, but in April futures contract and on NCDEX the prices are actually at 2954 per quintal. So what he does is that because the crop is going to get harvested in the month of March and April, he puts in his sell quote, or he does the sell of at that price on the April contract in the month of December. So by the time the contract expiry happens, so we are now in the month of April. There are two scenarios which can happen, either because of higher production or maybe some other challenges. So spot prices might decrease. So there could be good weather, good crop. The spot prices has gone down to 2800, and he has to go to the physical market and sell his crop at 2800. But because he has sold on exchange platform at 2954, 154 is his mark to market profit which happens. So that means the exchange ensures that his 154 rupees is given to the seller, and the effective price definitely becomes the same what he has hoped for at the in the month of December. The reverse, if you see, is also true. Because of certain conditions, there are low crop, the prices go up to three at a 3000 level, and at a final settlement price he has to, because it's a contract, he has agreed to sell it at 2954. He will lose, he has to buy back the contract at 3000 and loses rupees 46. But he can, so what it means, as I said, the convergence, the spot price has gone up. Now he can actually go to the market and sell his produce at 3000 rupees. So again, the 3000 minus 46 is 2954. So this is a very macro view of how the hedging works, because you are long on physical and you lock in your price as from a sell side, and as it expires, uh, because of the convergence, the spot and futures converge. You sell it at a physical, or you and take the loss either from physical or your from futures. So it gets compensated. If you lose in physical, you get compensated from futures. If you lose in futures, it gets compensated from your physical marketplace. So the farmers are today currently almost 260 odd farmer producer companies are linked with NCDEX, and they can, this is an illustrative site that how they can actually lock in their prices. Almost there are quite a few farmers representing almost few lakhs, not much in Indian context, but they take futures position and hedge their price risk through the exchange platform. So farmers can definitely take advantage through the FPO's route, because individually is very difficult, because we have small landholders, less number of marketable surplus. So farmer producer companies is a way to go. So, how to trade in the futures? So, you actually open an account, you get your KYC done. There, as I said, is a leverage instrument. So, you have to deposit a certain margin amount. Normal margin is approximately 10% of the contract value. Typical contract size is of 10 metric ton. There are variants in terms of the lower side. Then you start trade. There is a daily mark to market settlement, and there are three ways of settlement. As I said, there are virtual and physical. In case of virtual, there are squaring off and you get out of the market, or you roll over to the next month, or you either give or take delivery as in the exchange ecosystem. So this is the normal transactional process in the futures market. So we'll talk about the delivery ecosystem. It is quite robust. There is almost 2-3 million tons of warehouse space, which is spread across 14 states for NCDX. One needs to work through the repository, which is NERL, which are again, as I said, for electronic negotiable warehouse receipts, which are governed by WDRA, that is Warehouse Development and Regulatory Authority, which is the central regulator for ENWR. You can open up an account there, you take your material. It ensures that the warehouse men or the warehouse service provider, as we call them, they will have a assaying lab attached to them, which are all NABL accredited labs. They check your quality, they upload those quality, either pass or fail on the system, and the owner of the goods gets a credit if it's passed, and this goods get deposited on the exchange ecosystem, and you, like a bank account, you get a credit against your account number. that such and such in such and such location, such and such commodity is under your ownership, and these are the quality parameters. And if you want to deliver on the exchange platform, you do not have to do anything. You just instruct your broker that I want to deliver against my futures position, and everything will be happening through digital mechanism, where ultimately warehouse will get approval that now this goods have changed ownership. Is no longer with person A, it is ownership is now with person B. Now the person B can either take the delivery or still keep in the same warehouse as he deems fit. So, but to do all these things, one needs to understand that what are those factors that we talked about. So there are two aspects in agri-commodity research. Uh, is that one needs to understand the fundamental aspects, and as we have seen, the prices depends on demand and supply, and demand and supply gets impacted because of various factors, almost 10-15 factors. One needs to understand that how these factors impact the demand and supply, and ultimately prices. So so this is where the fundamental nature of the study includes. So that means what you need to understand, the price of the commodity, that is how it has moved over a period of time. uh, Price of the substitute commodities, as we talked about earlier, that in case of, if you're producing feed, maize price is going up, you might be going to buy bajra, or if your chana price is going up, you are a besan manufacturer, you buy yellow peas which is cheaper and substitute for that. So we need to understand the weather, seasonalities, the carryover stock, the government policies, as we talked about in the previous slides. So all these factors needs to be studied, especially at a macro level, to understand that how this prices, how this supply and demand is going to get influenced, and ultimately everything, all these factors get get addressed as a price change. So, if we look at the fundamental analysis of any crop, need to understand the crop calendar, the marketing season, the areas where it's grown, how it is grown. I mean, the all those aspects. And one of the important aspect, which actually important to know, is the stock to use uh, ratio. It gives an indication of carryover stock of any given commodity as a percentage of total use of those commodity, and this gives a very indication not only for the policymakers, also for the large traders who are exposed to such kind of a price movements. So so after you have, so this is a very important aspect, so that you, so there are whole departments in private research houses, commodity trading houses, who actually do these things day in and day out. This is just an example how, after doing all those studies, how these data gets sometimes presented in various websites. This is a USDA data, that is United States Department of Agriculture data, which tracks global crop acreages, including maize, which is an important cereal grain in the world. And if you look at it, the Indian data and the world data. So all these factors which we talked about earlier are taken into consideration and then brought in into this yield aspects. And by reading these factors, the large traders and the government can take their policy directions. The second aspect which happens in this analysis is the technical analysis. And so we understood that supply and demand determine prices, and changes in supply and demand cause changes in prices. And of course, once you understand the physical side of it, but not always going through a large reports, as we mentioned, that the price actually amalgates all those information and gives you an indication that what is going to be. and these prices are then taken over a period of time, either minute by minute, second by second, week by week, day by day, year by year, through charting tools. And these charting tools helps you to determine the price, futures prices, and that is how you take your decision in terms of what to do, buy or sell. These are mostly used for by the day traders or large trading houses. There are several types of charts. The candlestick chart is the most commonly used in the commodity market. Of course, there are line chart and bar charts to indicate, and there is another one what we call the within line chart RSI, relative strength index, which is also commonly used to indicate for a weak week-long traders or a day traders as we call them. These are mostly used by speculators in the marketplace to make some money out of this investments. So why commodity derivatives market for students? I think what we talked about in all these slides is that if you look at it, you have a commodity ecosystem, and it's very important and integral part of our economic activity. And these are the ecosystem players. If you look at it at a central, at one side we have the exchanges, the clearing corporation, and the repositories. We have research and consulting companies, we have the financial intermediaries who are there. There is a storage and warehousing industries. There are physical commodity trading houses and the commodity brokering houses who actually are engaged with exchanges to be part of, to allow to trade by individual clients. So these are certain examples for you to understand. If you like the trading houses, I have just named few, which is the large and maybe easy to remember names. We have organizations like Cargill, Louis Dreyfus, ADM, Bunge, Olams, and there are many more in this. Then we have the agri processors, large and small and regional processors. There are many names. So ITCs, Parleys, and Nestle's of the world. We have the banking system, which is huge, and banks as a primary sector, priority sector lending lends to commodity market, electronic warehouse receipt system. So they need people who understand this marketplace because there is still a knowledge gap. There are warehouse and storage industry. There are startups which are coming out, NCMLs of the world, Star Agri Bazaars. Then there are research houses which actually do this fundamental research. There are consulting organizations who do agricultural consulting. Of course, there are e-commerce platform, which is especially now more important because of the new ordinance which has come in. They would be requiring people with this knowledge. There are developmental agencies there. Recently, Government of India has announced 10,000 farmer producer companies, and definitely some of them will require good CEOs to manage them. And if you understand price risk and commodity derivatives market, that's another skill set onto your cap. And of course, ultimately, there are exchange ecosystem which you need to, which is also there. So I think I'm ending here mostly. I mean, this is just to highlight that how it is governed here in the country, and this is about our organization. And if you want to learn more about this commodity derivatives market, you can visit our website nicrindia.in and learn how to know about this marketplace more.